right. Well, thank you guys for being here. The challenge courses have been a labor of love for the last few years, trying to get those off the ground, get the training for our teachers. Like any position, we have lots of turnover sometimes, which we go through training and we got like great, I'm like, yay! And then we start over from scratch. So that's reality. But how many of your kids were in the gifted program at the elementary school? You have okay. So we used to have GRC, and we would meet through an ELA teacher who was certified in gifted strategies and the nature and needs of gifted. After 2020, we could not, I'm just going to be shoot straight with you, we could not get teachers to commit to going back to being certified because it is like anywhere from $13,000 to $17,000 and there's no extra pay. But it does make you a better teacher. but most people aren't up for that, especially if they already have their master's. So it was very difficult to get people to commit to go back. And my supervisor said, hey, let's see what we can do about bringing some of our advanced courses back, because we kind of depleted our advanced classes and all that, and you'll be in charge of training those teachers. Let's open it up to science and ELA, because not every gifted student is strong in language arts. So let's open it up, give a science option too, and then we'll open it up to all kids who want to participate in those courses and train our teachers in the nature and needs of gifted. So our gifted needs are still being met, but we're also allowing high-end learners a spot in a course too that they can benefit from as well. So that was kind of how the courses were birthed, and I wanted to get away from the title Advanced and Honors, and we'll get to that in just a second, and kind of chat with you about that. But there's a little QR code. If you want the slides from tonight, you can scan that, and it'll be at the end too. But as for today, one of the things, unless you try something beyond what you have already mastered, you'll never grow. And our kids are at this very ripe time in their development. Just their whole brain chemistry, everything is primed for learning. The unfortunate thing is they don't want to learn. It's like this really sad thing. Like, they have this great potential to learn all things, and really over the course of their middle school years, if you have a gifted child, their brain prunes a little later, and I can go into that another time, but they hold on to things a little bit longer before those pathways start clearing up, and other kids start to prune about 9 to 11. And those pathways are clearing up space, and those masteries are coming in. So whatever they're doing and spending their time doing is how they're building, those brain pathways. So if they're just sitting around playing a video game or doing it's a great time to learn a language. It's a great time to play an instrument, to try new things, to explore new things. It's the best time to do it. That's why, when we try to learn a language now, we're not very successful because we've already pruned that language acquisition part of our brain. So we can do it, it's just a lot harder. So they're at the prime of learning. And a lot of our kids need a little bit more. And they do want to learn. I joke about them not wanting to learn, but a lot of kids still want to learn and enjoy learning. What we'll look at today, why we call it a challenge course, how it's different, what your child can expect. And if you happen to have a high-end learner who struggles, you usually figure this out 6th grade. You're kind of smooth sailing all through elementary school. In 6th grade, the wheels fall off. And you're like, what? Because they have 6 different teachers, all these different rules, they're keeping up, and they've never had to use that prefrontal cortex. Because elementary school teachers are phenomenal about organizing and controlling a classroom, and they have very clear processes that are there. When they come here, the kids are kind of they have to have their processes, and they're like, you don't know how to take notes? What are you doing? They're expected to take notes. They're expected to keep up with their things, and their brain's just not ready to do that. So a lot of times you'll see it in 6th grade, especially at first semester. You guys just got through it. And you're like, what has happened to my baby? Nothing. It's normal. They just go through it. But some of our high-end kids they also struggle with a learning disability of some type. They might have dyslexia, ADHD, OCD, any of like your little acronyms there. They could have any of those things which make learning difficult, and then you compound that with just the adolescent brain changes anyway. It's super difficult for middle school especially. But there are things that we can do to help with that. So the first thing is why call it a challenge course? It's like, why is it, how's it different than advanced and honors? Whatever words we utter should be chosen with care, for people will hear them and be influenced by them for good or ill. And I'll be the first to tell you that I feel like the advanced honors has been used for ill. And I'll be at the ballpark, wherever, like, my kid's in all advanced classes, they're taking all AP. Or my son scored a 36 on his ACT, is that good? Like, really? Really? No, it's horrible. But the kids and their needs are different than what we want for them. Some kids don't need extra challenge. They're challenged enough in a gen ed course, and our teachers do a good job in a gen ed course challenging them in those areas. So this, like, the challenge courses are not semantically, when we look at honors and advanced, the English side of me comes out. It's a reward or a prize, public admiration or respect, a person or thing that wins fame or glory for another. Like, it's just so ridiculous to me, because a child's needs are not advanced or honors. Yeah, our needs are our needs, and at any end of the spectrum of needs, our kids can need, some might need a challenge, some life is a challenge, so it doesn't, like, calling classes advanced or honors, we can't change it at the state level, but we can change our language in the middle school. And I want our parents to understand, like, this isn't to get away from the bad kids. It's not at all. Like, that's not what the purpose of this is for. Your kid will be challenged, and your kid will have a hard time. And we are teaching our teachers to meet them right outside that mastery level and make it uncomfortable for them. So if you have a high-stress kid, might not be the class for them. If they have to have all A's and they're crazy wild and they come home and fall apart or think that they're a failure, that's another issue that needs to be taken care of. Another day I could talk to you for hours about perfectionism and some of the problems it causes with our kiddos. But we can start with the language and having them understand, hey, we signed up for a challenge course. And what we get, and all of our teachers are like, this needs to stop. Because the kid be like, I didn't sign up, my mom signed me up. Okay? If you're signing your kid up, then come sit in the class and do the work for them, because they don't want to be there, and it's a problem for everyone else in the class. And I'll just be straight with you, and you share that with all your friends too. Like, it's not for everybody, and it's not meant to be an award or something great. It doesn't keep you out of classes at the high school. If you choose not to take the challenge courses here, you can go do anything that you want at the high school. And I say this carefully to the grades at middle school do not roll over. Okay? This is where they're building and starting habits and learning. It's a great time for them to experience some struggle and failure, because it does not count against them. As soon as they hit 9th grade, from the day they walk in, everything counts against them. And everybody's, oh, well, we're getting them ready for high school. Like, let's just get them ready for now, and let high school come when high school comes. They'll be equipped. They'll have the skills that they need. They'll be ready for that. But the language of honors and advance, I didn't care for any of those, but I love challenge. I love it. It's my new favorite word. But a job, duty, or situation that is difficult because you must use a lot of effort, determination, and skill in order to be successful. If you have a kid that does everything easy peasy and never has to sweat, their brain's not growing. They're like, oh, he gets it all the time. He never has to practice. They're not learning. Okay? So you got to put them in a situation where they're learning. We learn by making mistakes and going back and correcting those mistakes. We don't learn by just knowing it when we come in, or regurgitating information and just sending it back out into the world. That's not how they're learning. Question if something is true or legal. Test someone's ability or determination. An invitation for you to prove that you can achieve a particular goal. They actually have to prove it. So a lot of our gifted kids and high ability learners do not like a challenge. I'm just going to be straight. They want the easy A, they want the guarantee, and they don't want to sweat. Okay? And it is what it is. They're like, yeah. So they hate the idea that they're going to be challenged. So you need to have that talk with your kid and change the language about a challenge. A challenge is something good that helps you grow, and regardless of if you achieve what you wanted to through that challenge, you're learning a lot of things along the way. And our kids need to see us as parents taking challenge and learning things and taking risks. So that's the whole verbiage, the whole reason behind it, because I want our parents and our students to understand that it's not a title. It's something that they are going to have to work at, and it might be the first time that they've ever had to work in all of their little years. So wanted to point that part out. Whole goal is to get them outside of their comfort zone, because nothing happens, no growth happens in a comfort zone. We know this. Anybody who's ever been an athlete or learned anything, you know that you have to move out of the comfort zone and keep sliding. We're trying to get them to that growth zone. Learning zone's good too, like getting them past that fear and just getting them into the learning's good. But we're hoping to push them into a growth zone and getting them comfortable with the process of learning, not the product of learning, not that end result, but the whole process that goes into it. So it's going to be it may be harder for high ability students than for others. Why might that be? Why might they not like a challenge? They might be wrong. Does that feel good? Because I do not like being wrong. I work really hard to not be wrong a lot, but I am wrong sometimes. And I just admitted that, and I'm recording it. My husband might hear that at some point, but I have been wrong before. But it's a little uncomfortable. They're not feeling as confident sometimes. And any kind of uncertainty doesn't feel good. Think of us as adults. Like, it does not feel good when we're asked to do something that is new to us and we don't like. Most of us fight that. And they're just doing what kids are supposed to do and fighting those things. And because our brain wants the path of least resistance, so the easy way is what the brain wants to do. And we've got to reprogram that and teach them how to see a challenge as something beneficial for them that'll help them in the long run and throughout the process of it. Two choices for Chelsea. A couple of the schools have social studies instead of science, but at Chelsea Middle we have science and English are your two options for challenge courses. Based on, our gifted students are guaranteed one seat in the course of their choice. If there's space in the second course, then that's opened up and they're provided a seat in there too. But it is open to all students. So I think on the form it will say if you only have one choice, what would it be? Which one would you prefer? So you're just doing there could be a possibility that they get both. For sixth graders coming in, it's hard enough for them sometimes, so a lot of the principals don't like to offer them more than one course just to see how they can do. But I don't think was that an issue here? Yeah, some of the other principals just don't like that, so sixth grade only has one option. But at Chelsea Middle, they will allow you to do both courses if there's space in there. So you have those two options. Then I gave you that list of questions on there, and it really are you ready, parents? Because it's really a you thing more than the kids sometimes. Because am I okay with allowing my child to struggle with the demands and expectations of a challenge course? If you're somebody that just swoops in and takes over the reins and doesn't let them work it out, or you just get all stressed out if your kid's stressed out, the challenge course might not be for you. It just might not. It's okay. It's not for everyone. It doesn't make you a bad parent. Just be real with yourself. If you have a kid, one of my kids, I would have never put in a challenge course. He would have driven me absolutely bonkers if I put him, because because he's the kid that just sits there and waits for you to, he's learned the art of getting a teacher to do it for him. Um, and he'll just push the buttons until you collapse. And some kids are really good at that. You know your own child. Am I more concerned about my child's growth and learning or letter grade? Something you got to be real with. If you are like the person who like, my proud parent of an honor roll kid and you like that little tag and you can't imagine life without it, or you want them to be a national, and it's not that they can't be by any means. It is not that they can't be, but if that's what your main concern is, challenge course probably isn't for you. And can I offer my child the support needed at home to be successful in a challenge course? So are there quiet places in your house? Is there time for your kid to read, to study? Can you help your child organize thoughts? And like, because they're gonna have questions, there are gonna be things that they have to come home and ask questions about, to do some research. They will have homework. It's not a ton, but they are expected to do things at home. I know a lot of teachers have stopped doing that altogether. The challenge course teachers have not. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you have a kid that's in multiple sports and does all these things, or you have like I have 4 kids, I'm like, keep it easy for me, kids. Help mom out. But none of them listen to me. So they go and do hard things, and I get to figure out how to make it all work and help them whenever I have time. But you got to figure that part out for you. The middle school years are the harder years. They really are. It's tough. If this is your first go through middle school, 7th grade's usually the worst. And then it gets better. Like 6th grade, it's just awkward adjustment. 7th grade, hormones are the highest, brain waves are the lowest. It's a recipe for disaster. It's just like they're all over the place, and they don't know what's going on. So if you can offer the support they need, it's a good thing to do. If you're all about the A, you might want to go another way. Just think like that's the one thing I want you to remember from tonight. Expect low grades. That's a sign of learning. Okay, you got to go through and fail a little, and I'm not saying they're coming out with an F. Like they could end up with an A at the end of the course, but they're going to have some grades that should be low. And if they're not, I tell you, question the teacher. Why is my kid making all A's? They're not learning. And that's what you have to get in your, like our parents have to get that in their minds. Because if your kid's always making an A, there's a thing called grade inflation. It's real. Because teachers don't want to deal with parents. They don't. Just give them the A, just give them the points. Because parents will write a dissertation on why you should take that grade. Your kid, first of all, your kid, and we tell the kids when they start on the challenge course, it is your responsibility to address the teacher about your grades. Okay? If your kid cares about their grades, they should be taking it up with the teacher, not mom and dad. And they're never too young to deal with that. My kids have been doing it since the 4th grade. Like, go take it up. And if they can't, and I'll always say, hey, if it doesn't get solved and you made the initiative to come talk to the teacher, all means bring mama and daddy in. That's what, but give them the confidence that they can go talk to somebody and accomplish something on their own, that they don't need mom and dad to come in and fight the battle there. And it's always about a letter grade. It's always about a grade. And the kids are like, I turned it in. You're like, really, did you, Johnny? Because Google tells a different story, and Google doesn't lie, because it keeps all of your drafts. So it doesn't just delete into no man's land. We have it. Don't assume that a B means that a student is struggling or not trying. Okay? So if they're making a B or C, or they, God forbid, they make an F on something, it doesn't mean that they're not trying. Like a lot of them are learning for the first time how, like, oh, that's not how I study. So when they come home with a bad grade or a grade that you don't love, what did you do wrong? How can you fix that the next time? Instead of, you're punished, I'm taking away, you're just not spending your time appropriately. And then you take everything away from them. So then what do? Lie, cheat, steal, sell their baby brother to get the A. They don't care anymore. It's all about the A and not being punished. It's fear-based, and that's not learning. You can't learn when you're in fear. And I think we have a lot of kids just living in fear and not growing. Would you agree with that? Okay, because they really don't care. So this is just like, you can tell me to, that's ridiculous and mind my own business. But avoid punishing your kid for not making A's. Have a discussion with them, but if you punish them for not making an A, I don't know, maybe y'all were superstar students and never slipped up. Like, but I mean, some of it, that part, the punishment enough is feeling like they're not smart in a class with other people who are maybe, yeah, that's punishment for these kids. That peer group adds a lot more pressure than you ever will. And it's hard enough just being a middle school kid, but then having to worry about your life. Like, because I mean, I've had kids just fall apart in absolute panic attack. Because if they go home and their mom sees this grade, then their whole life's ruined. And they see it as life and death, guys. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the adolescent brain processes very differently, and it's the end of the world for some of these kids. And they don't want to feel like, nobody wants to feel like a failure. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when you get a low grade. So trust that these teachers are working them towards something. Some of those bronze and silver grades should be a little lower. And even, I mean, some of the golds might, and they'll have a chance to bounce back. We really focus on revision and reflection with our teachers. I hope that they're doing that in the classroom. Most of them are when I check up on them. Do they have time to do work? Do they have time? I mean, some kids are so jam-packed they don't have a second. And if they do have time, can your child manage wisely? The time management is something that you can help your kid with. That's not innate. Okay? They're not born with this clock of like management, like, oh, this is they can't see very far into the future when they hit that adolescent stage anyway. It's about 12 hours, most you're getting out of them as far as future thinking. And I love that line. I'm so overscheduled, if it weren't for timeouts, I'd have no free time at all. So some kids, that's real. Like some kids are there. So time is needed. I don't have time to do work at home. If that's, like we'll hear kids say that. Students and parents, and these are from the teachers, I'm like, what do you need parents to understand before they sign up with this? Students and parents need to understand that there will be work to do outside of a class in a challenge course. That doesn't mean they'll be loaded down with homework, but they will have to study for possibly the first time in their life, or read, or even do some work at home, okay? It is required of them. Any AP course that you have at the high school, you better believe you're coming home with work. My AP Chem, AP Lang right now for my daughter, and it's just constant. It never ends. We don't read novels together in class. Okay, that's another surprise for some of the kids because they're used to that being read to them, or they have the time. Like some of the teachers don't do that at all. Like you read at home, when you come in, we're discussing that and we're taking it to deeper levels, but your job's to be reading that at home. And kids have a hard time doing that. Like reading has declined drastically in the last 10 years, but really the last 3, it's like, like it has fallen off. So if your child does not want to read, class is not for them on the ELA side. But I say that even on the science for 6th and 7th grade, those are both heavy reading sciences. You have earth science and life science, lots of reading. Okay? Lots of research and expectations there. Physical science in the 8th grade, so yeah, there's still reading in there, but it's not the same as life and earth science. Independence is required, okay? Some students, they need you to hold their little hand. They're like, what is it? Where's my little checklist? You have like little Polly Perfect that comes up with her little list and it's like, I got all did I get them all? Did you check them all? Yes, then you have, but is it right? And as a teacher, sometimes we just want them to figure it out. We don't want to give them the affirmation to start because that's part of the lesson. And parents are like, you're not even helping him when he asks questions. I'm like, I am, and he has all the tools he needs. He just wants me to say it for him. And that's what we deal with a lot with our students. It's there for them. It's in black and white. Obviously, we'll clarify questions and do all that, but sometimes they have to, they are given and taught the skills so they can be successful in these courses. The teachers don't just throw them to the wolves. It's a lot of build-up in that first 9 weeks especially. Will the challenge course create acceptable tension that leads to growth, or will it create frustration that leads to anxiety? That's a big one. Okay? We don't need any more anxious little kids running around freaking out and thinking that there's something wrong with them because they can't get out. Like, it's a lot to juggle life, and they're asked to do a lot more in the way of thinking that they haven't been asked to do before, and sometimes it's super frustrating because they haven't had to dig real deep, And now we're asking them to go to a level that they might not be familiar with. And it's hard and frustrating for some of those kids. And then they get it wrong and they get upset. And it's this whole spiral. And they'll come home and tell you, like, my daughter specifically is queen of, he told me that I have to have this today. It's like 3 weeks out because she knows that I'm a procrastinator. So my little anxious daughter's figured mom out. Like, if I tell her it's due now, then she'll go get it. And then she has 3 weeks to work on it, and mom won't impede her success by waiting until like the day before to get the poster board or whatever. So my baby is one that, like, it does create some anxiety, but we've gone over it enough that she understands that her grades are not what, like, and if your kids make an A, speaking of the grades, if your kids make an A, do not tell them good job, okay? Ask them, what did you learn? And they probably won't be able to answer that, okay? Don't praise them for something that they didn't earn, okay? It should be a struggle. When they get a C, well, what did you learn? Well, I learned that I didn't know how these two things connected, and this is what I needed to do. They'll be able to tell you. So ask them about that on the learning, but the frustration part, and that helps my daughter because she knows that I don't care about what those grades are, I care about what she's learning. Does your child have the motivation and resilience to bounce back from a low grade or to persevere through difficult content? Okay, so if it's something hard or that they don't like, can they sustain attention? Can they keep pushing through? Is there some things that just are like plant cells? Like, any of my 7th grade science teachers might whip me for this one. It's really not exciting. And I just remember fighting that battle with my son about, like, when am I ever going to need to know about a plant cell, Mom? It could be useful at some point in life, I don't know. But can they persevere? And if it's difficult, the other thing too is a lot of our high ability learners are very black and white. And you might notice this. It's a very rigid thought process. There's right and wrong, black and white, no gray. And we're showing them all the gray because that's how you become a thinker. And that's how you become a problem solver. You can't just see the black and white and cut it off. So some of the content might be difficult because it challenges them to think gray when they're wanting black and white. And that's hard for parents. So again, that's another thing. If you're not comfortable with multiple perspectives being shared, what you have to understand is any perspectives being shared, it's like that little statement that they make on all the commercials. This is not the beliefs of the teacher. It's not, but we have to give them multiple perspectives. We have to show them other sides of stories so they can form their own thoughts. We would be raising an ignorant generation if we didn't allow that, like, if there's an argument, both sides have something to argue about. They have to stand on something. And to better support your argument, you need to know the opposition's argument inside and out. Okay? That requires you to actually look at the opposition and understand what they believe and why they feel the way they do. Does not mean ever that you have to agree with it, but you have to know it. And some of our kids get very scared of knowing because they're like, I'm right. There is no other. So they have that very rigid thought. So that's something to be aware of. Is my child capable of responding to specific feedback and revising their best efforts? Most kids don't like a revision. And I would always get it, like, they think that they're right at their final draft, and they bring it in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get you to annotate this paper. I want you to identify where your strongest part was, why it was your strongest part, where's the weakest part of this essay or argument. What's something that you need to work on? They're like, what? They had to, like, mark all over their perfectly formatted paper and do, like, oh. But they got to the point where they understood there's never a final draft because we can always revise and make it better. And we keep learning new skills and adding those two things. Like, hey, go back to any piece of writing you want. How can you use this skill? Like, okay, so that's what we're trying to do in the ELA side. In science, it's really them looking at the process that they went through in a lab and reflecting on how other people did it, and then going back and say, oh, this is what I can do the next time to make sure that I do this right. But kids, the feedback part, getting feedback, and that's something that they need a lot of practice with, giving and getting, and understanding how feedback is a way to become it. Like when you accept it, it's a way that you can grow. When you refuse it, you can't grow. So we try and work with them a great deal in class with that. Motivation, it does have to, like some of it will come, but if they are like zero motivated, it wouldn't be a good plan to put them in a class that's going to require them to have some self-motivation, especially like the 8th grade project for ELA and science are both difficult projects that require these kids to sustain some real, some real thought and effort. The assessments, they will look different. I preach it all the time. If the answer can be found in A, B, C, or D, there's a better question. Okay? So I don't want a multiple choice. I don't want them doing that. I want them to show like a performance task. Show me that you understand this and know this. So it's going to require more work. It is going to be harder. Will they still have some multiple choice? Yes, because that's like those are easy for us too as teachers. But for the most part, we want them to see a different way of assessing what they're learning. And I already mentioned that the class titles and labels, it doesn't matter, because when you get to high school, you can still take your honors courses in AP. It just, it doesn't matter if you're in the challenge course or the gen ed class. Can my child handle the academic rigor of a challenge course? Like, you really know if you have a rock for a child. I'm just saying like that they're really not thinking much about anything except like the latest song out or whatever. Or if you have a kid who's very inquisitive, asking all the questions, wants to know, like, if you have a kid that's seeking answers and has great questions, if your kid is a good question asker, that's what I look for more than any answers they can provide. Can you ask a good question? Because that shows intelligence. So can they handle that? Can they handle uncertainty? That's that ambiguity piece that I was talking about through observing multiple perspectives and thinking critically and creatively. And is my child deeply interested or talented in the challenge course subject? If they are neither deeply interested nor talented, no, move on. It's okay. They're not going to miss anything and fail at life in any way if they don't take the challenge course. But if they love it, go all out for it. That's what I would suggest on there. Tolerating ambiguity is a life skill that decreases stress and opens the door to creativity and deeper thought. Okay. How many kids could use some stress decrease reduction, and adults as well? It starts with ambiguity, being able to sit in the uncertainty and not freak out. And that's what we want to teach our kids at a young age, because the fact of the matter is that learning to live with ambiguity is learning to live with how life really is, full of complexities and strange surprises. And people hate that. Whenever I share this quote, my husband is a hater of this too, Brandy as well. Like, no, because we like certainty. We want the certain go, but that ambiguity is where life is, and learning to just embrace that and be like, okay, I don't have all the answers right now. I don't have a clear plan, but I can figure this out. I have some information to start with, and I have skills to move forward. And that's what we want to get our students with. Neurosis is the inability to tolerate ambiguity. Right? So that's when you get all of the anxiety and stress and OCDs and try and control everything. It comes from not being okay with uncertainty, and we want our kids to be okay there. Ambiguity, discomfort, and complexity, they are all friends. And that's what we are trying to dive these kids into throughout the next 3 years in those courses. How are they different? Okay, so challenge course teachers participate in ongoing training, so they come in 4 times throughout the year and 2 full days over the summer. We go through coaching cycles with them and work with them as far as instructional strategies, making sure that they feel confident in certain aspects. Like, 'cause as an English teacher, there are certain areas that I didn't come in feeling very confident teaching, but over the years and having great mentors makes us better. So our teachers are comfortable now saying, hey, I don't really know a great way to teach this, which has been great. Like the kind of connections our teachers and growth our teachers have shown in the last 3 years has been pretty phenomenal. But they're learning all of these things, creating alternative assessments, design engaging and relevant and thought-provoking content, as we want to keep them interested. We do like them to engage in discussion and think through things and argue and learn the art of arguing. And elicit deeper thinking. And the big one is we have conceptual lenses that we use for 6th through 8th grade. So 6th grade starts out with risk-taking and resilience. 7th grade moves into interdependence and perspective, and 8th grade is discernment and empowerment. So we walk them through this whole thing, like you have to be able to take risks, you have to be okay with failure, bounce back, you have that resilience. And the fact of the matter is, if we look around, and not just our community, but just kids in general, this age, all through those teen years, they're coming up with a different way to escape problems that ends their lives. And it's because they don't know that they can fail. They don't have resilience to bounce back. They don't have those coping strategies. They don't understand how all things work together. It's not just one component. All of these things work together. And when something happens to one person, it happens to everyone. So we try and get them to understand interdependence, not just through like life science and ELA, but like how are we seeing it everywhere? How does everything rely on something else? And then why is it important? Once you understand the concept of interdependence, then you have to be open to seeing other perspectives and oh, well, there's another way to see this that I'm just not seeing. Because again, we have a lot of them that just shut the, like, nope, this is what it is. And they have tunnel vision, and that creates a lot of problems that it doesn't need to. It's a skill of when they start going, and if you are a spiraler too, because most kids get it from a parent. So if you're one of those parents that spiral and you struggle in that area, it's like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, but it could also be, and walk your kids through that. Model that for them. Like, I'm stressing out over this right now because I'm thinking this, but it could also be these things. What are the other possibilities the situation could be? And teach them how to do that and create that skill. And that's what we do in class too, whether it's through a writing assignment, through something they're reading, through a lab that they're practicing. We tie those life skills in as much as we can, but it's important for parents to know that these are things that you can be working with and your kids desperately need. So in the challenge courses, same exact standards, okay? 7th grade standards to 7th grade standard. We have to teach those standards, it's required. So it's important to understand that they're not doing more work. It's not like, oh, okay, well, gen ed is gonna write 3 sentences and challenge course is gonna write 3 paragraphs. That's not it. We're not doing more work, but they will have more materials sometimes, so that it's not like they're being, the outputs, we're not necessarily asking them to do all that, but they're inputs. There's going to be a lot more input for reading materials and research and requirements, because the more information they come in, the more that they can work through and form their own decisions and opinions. And the deeper the content knowledge that they have, the more meaningful the learning experience is for those. So that's what we're trying to get all the teachers on board, and they're working really hard together. And that's, I mean, it really has been a joy to work with these teachers, because I thought they were going to be highly resistant, if I'm just being honest. I thought everybody was going to resist, but they really are embracing it, and they're having fun with it. And if the teachers are having fun with it, then hopefully that's turning out to kids having fun as well. Exploring multiple perspectives, build tolerance for ambiguity, develop task commitment through year-long concept-based projects, and that every grade level and every challenge course has a year-long project. Think and practice like an expert. So we want them in the roles of a botanist if they're in science, or a PR direct, like whatever it is, we're wanting them to practice some of those roles. Obviously, they're middle school, and we have limited resources. We don't have a mentor for all of these things, but we're trying to at least give them an idea, okay, here are terms and tools that these professions will use. Here are things that are expected of them, responsibilities that they have. And if you're going to write a process journal, what might that look like in the real world? What might your lab notes look like if you are an engineer? How are they different than if you are a botanist or any other field that you go into? But we're wanting them to practice like an expert. and engage with authentic audiences. And that's something that it's been the difficult one to get authentic audiences for our students, but the projects that they're coming up with, this year we just kind of were like put them into play. And so next year we'll actually have more of authentic audiences for our students, have actual competitions for them. We do have like, for the 7th grade science projects, the county commission they'll come in and help judge, and some of the mayors from different cities are working together. So they're actually speaking to real people that have a real interest in the projects that they're doing. So I think that's super meaningful for them. And when you know that you're doing it for somebody else, you always up your game. So that was kind of the goal behind that. Like, what you're doing, don't embarrass yourself. That's when you should be worried about your grade. Like when you're going in front of people, that's when it's time to step up and put your game face on, and play to win. So yeah, there are times when they might struggle throughout the year, but on those presentations and when they have that audience, we're hoping that they step up and are able to they've had enough practice. Our teachers work with them really hard on how to present and things to do. So those are some of the things your kids can expect. Just really quickly, the synthetic impact is the 8th grade. Anybody going into 8th grade? Okay. So synthetic impact is the science one for physical science. They're working off the standard collect and analyze information to illustrate how synthetic materials are derived from natural resources and how they impact society. So it is this very and I was so proud of our science teachers for working through this and coming up with it, because I love the project. I think they hate it now because it's it's hard for them to make it all work together, because their curriculum, it's not smooth. They have to keep going back to things that they already taught, but it's a year-long deal where the kids investigate the synthetic materials. They go and volunteer at different places. It's been so cool to see the kids go out and help with different, like they had the lady with the plastic bags who turned them into mats for the homeless. Community on the Rise is the only place in Alabama that recycles, and they figured out a way to recycle number 5 plastics, and they turn those into like jewelry and cups and resale. And all of that money goes to providing salaries for formerly homeless people who work there, and it recovers documents for our homeless people in Birmingham. This is its 4th year as a nonprofit, and they've done some amazing things. So the kids got to work there. They heard, some of our former homeless people talk about how it impacted them and what they've learned, and then they were teaching them how to go through the whole process. So they do all that, and then they come up with a way to either reuse a synthetic, repurpose it in some way, or create a way to solve a problem to decrease. Because what they find out really quickly, as much as we all want to say recycling's the way, it's very costly and it's hard to manage it. And a lot of it ends up going into the waste anyway. So what can we do if that's not the best option? What are some other options? So they problem solve and talk to our folks at the county that solve these problems, and then they've even contacted different universities to try and hey, what's going on? How is this happening? What's going on? So it's been really neat to have the kids so involved in finding things on their own. So that's the 8th grade science one. The 8th grade English is a personal project. They could pick anything from playing the banjo to when's the best time to take a 3-point shot on a basketball court, to researching the psychological nuances of serial kill. It doesn't matter. It's what they want. Obviously, parents have to approve of that. I only said that because a girl actually was really fascinated by childhood trauma and future criminal activity. Anyhow, but she did her whole little study on that. But they come up with what they want to study. They have to pull the credible research. They create their own rubric on how they will be judged, and they present it in a way that they want to. So this is one of those projects that is not set in stone, and it is terrifying for them to they freeze up. But it's a fabulous project for our kids to explore things that they love. It goes over 57% of the 8th grade ELA standards and just that project. So it covers those, thoroughly immerses them in the research process and their communication. And they have the freedom, like they might choose to do a podcast or write a research paper or create a video, like whatever they want to do, however they want to present what they've learned and the process that they went through to get to that learning. And some of them fail, by the way. they want to go learn to play the banjo and they realize a year's not enough time to really be able to pull that off. I might have learned a few things, but I have to practice a lot more. So some of them have created video games. It's just whatever they want. So it is kind of that part's cool, but it's really hard in the guiding point up front and helping your child narrow down what they could do and find something that they love and can sustain for a year, because we're asking them to do it for a whole year. Dive in, kids. And they're like, oh. So that's the 8th grade one. 7th grade is Project Interdependence, where they're actually working with Shelby County Council's office to work in teams to redesign a sustainable outdoor park with intentionally designed green space that will improve quality of life for all community members with a focus on attracting teenagers to the parks. The design solution should be reviewed by the Shelby County Council's office based on a grant opportunity that will be awarded to the group of students whose design most efficiently meets the criteria outlined below. So it has to be sustainable, cost efficient, productive. It has to look good, be therapeutic, accessible, and inclusive. Okay? So they work together in groups. They take on all these different roles. You might have an engineer. You might have someone who is a landscape designer, someone who is looking at like the materials and doing the finance part of it. So they work in groups and create these different plans and then present them. So that one has been super cool, watching some of the kids go through and their questions that they've come up with. Who knows, I actually think that Oak Mountain might be able to pull off theirs because they have the opportunity to be able to do that with some money that was left over to do an outdoor classroom, which is super cool. And then the 7th grade Global Goal Getters. This one is, there's the 17 global goals. The kids can pick any one of them from ending poverty to sustainable, and I don't know, there's 17 different ones that they can pick from. And we actually took some of them off because some parents don't agree with them. So to make the teachers happy and not have to deal with phone calls about whether or not something is true, we just took those off and dealt with the ones that were not problematic. And if a kid actually wanted to do one of the other ones, a parent can choose that. We're not going to keep them from it. We just don't show it to them up front. We just give them the easy ones, like clean water, end poverty, and sustainable structures and things like that. So they work on that, and they do a multi-genre magazine that they create. And it's in digital format, they're doing some really neat things. They wrote a children's book, and they used they had to use it metaphorically. Whatever that issue was, turn it into a metaphor, kind of tie it in and create different animals represent things and colors represent things. So they've had to think in a very complex way to share that information. And then they work with different genres each quarter. And then the last quarter, they can choose 3 different genres that they haven't explored yet. And they'll add that, turn it into a magazine. They learn how to do Canva, do all of the things, work together, pick the templates, create everything. So it's a full-on process. And then within the school, they'll kind of judge those magazines, and the top ones they'll send to the district, and then we'll vote on those up there. As a result, the scholarly traits, I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is kind of, instead of having all of the rules, this is what we expect when the kids come in. Are you prepared? Do you set goals? Do you ask questions and seek answers? Because the kid that just sits there with their Chromebook that's dead, and it's I can't do anything. You might not need to be in the class. If you can't solve a problem like that, you might need to move on. Are you using varied sources, or do you only use one source? So, and whenever teachers are Where are you struggling at today? Coming prepared. Okay, how can we fix this problem? So, are you saving your ideas? Are you pondering ideas? Do you have a thirst for knowledge? And that's one of those things that teachers try and come up with these like hook questions in the beginning to try and get them thirsty for knowledge. Obviously, their communication skills, revision skills, academic vocabulary is a big focus because if we want them practicing like experts, they have to talk like an expert, because you wouldn't want your surgeon being like, yeah, I got to cut out that thingamajig and we'll do like, no, you're not touching me. You want to be using the language that is appropriate for that academic area and whatever profession that we're asking them to take on. Their academic skills will improve, but this is a slow process, and a lot, again, like I mentioned very briefly about the kids not using that prefrontal cortex. It's not really developed. It's not developed until they're like late 20s. But all of that's like a tangled mess. They get a dump of gray matter, and it slows down all of those wonderful plan, foresee consequences, be able to organize, delay gratification, like all the important things that keep us out of jail and alive, they struggle with for a good stretch of time until that pruning takes place, and then it frees up space and those academic skills come along. So don't give up hope on them, and don't demean them when they, you're at school and you look down, they don't have shoes on their feet. What? Are you like, they're kids, they're going to forget those things, they'll have some issues, but those academic skills will develop, but it is practice. They're not innate. And if you just tell your kid to go study, they don't know how to study. If you tell, figure that out, sometimes they need help figuring it out. They don't know the first step to take, so you can help them identify the steps. But those skills will progress, and their thinking skills will be strengthened for sure. They have to justify their thoughts all the time, and it can't just be because. And they, and if you are a parent of a kid who asks why a lot, don't take that as like this disrespectful offense. That's just like, they need to understand the why. We all need to understand why we're doing something before we do it. So sometimes they just need to know why it's important. Like, oh, okay. They just need to know the why, but we're like, because I said so, just do it. And that doesn't ever answer the question, and they always have questions. So we always want them to justify the why. We justify our why, like, why are we doing this? And we don't, because I said so. This is why. This standard right here, this is what you have to master. This is how it's doing it. This is why we do these things, and this is what it's going to get you. And they're like, okay. I still don't like it. You don't have to. But they know the why. Developing those research skills, really synthesizing a lot of information, and that's a hard skill for adults. So teaching them when they're younger how to piece these things together is what we're looking for. And very quickly, because I know you guys have to get out of here, just so you can see some of the thinking differences. All right, so that first question, what are 2 important details of Harry Potter's origin story? That's an okay question. How important is Harry Potter's origin story to the central conflict? Which one detail of Harry's origin story could you change that would fundamentally change the central conflict in the story? Well, they better know what that central conflict is. They better understand that. And then they have to justify, evaluate his other choices. It's very complex in the thinking. So it's not that they're not that's a decent question. But that's where those are the types of questions that we're looking at. And some of the ELA courses, how did the actions of the main character contribute to the conflict? And then whose contribution to the conflict had the most deleterious effect? And then they got to like, and then they argue. It gets them into that arguing, and kids love to argue, and we just give them a ground, like a little stage to argue. What makes a person a hero? Based on this, would you say Katniss qualifies as a hero? Justify your answer with evidence from the text. So that's an example from ELA 8. Challenge ELA. In what ways does the political turmoil of America mirror and inform Holling's process of maturity throughout the novel? We're not just asking you, who's the main character? And what's the conflict? So it's a much deeper thought process. And we work with them consistently to get them there. This is from Life Science. So view the picture of the Statue of Liberty. What is the effect of these converging parts? Think about the contributions that were made to complete this task. Which contribution was the most impactful in creating a final product? How does this parallel our studies of cells? Okay, so now we're stretching all of that to get there. And in our regular life science course, view the picture of the Statue of Liberty, list 3 observations. How can this photo connect to our studies of cells? So they're thinking, it's not that they're not thinking in the gen ed course at all. They're thinking, it's just a different level. So you got to be real with where your child is when you're making those decisions. Is this something we're comfortable with, or can they go here? Are they ready for that? How would the river see its contribution to the development of the canyon? Would wind erosion have the same perspective? Now they're taking on the perspective of inanimate things and trying to figure out what those differences are. So students will investigate the different weather patterns. That's a typical standard for our 6th grade kids. Students will investigate different weather patterns and the way they converge to influence economics of farming. Okay, so how does that all work together? It's just deeper. So I just want you guys to be aware, these are hard things, like they're hard. And for your 6th, 7th, or 8th grader to consistently come in and perform is a lot. And it's not saying that they can't, but it's a whole lot to ask of your child. So be thinking of that. Here's just another example of prescriptions. Like these are all different sentence prescriptions that you could have for ELA: generalization, summary, comparison, contrast, definition, problem, solution. They're given those numbers and then they have to put a sentence together based on that. So they have to know what a generalization is, they have to know those, and then how do you work them all together to make sense in one statement? And I was going to have you all try that, but you don't look like you're up for it today. So we'll skip. Same even with vocabulary. Here it's going to be in the regular life science class. It's the standard. It's what is expected, and here we're pushing them a little bit further to stretch it and do more with those, make those connections, extend that knowledge. I'm going to skip this one. Adding complexity. So let's say that they just learned about cell division. Cell division is like skydiving because, so they have to they just pick a random one and they go and they make those analogies. Age of expansion is like blank because of, and having them explain and tie it, and that's like one of the deepest forms of learning when you can make an analogy and tie it to it and explain it. And that's also a way that a teacher can easily spot an error in thinking. Like, oop, no, it is not at all like that. That is not correct. So let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll let you be 8, okay? So you have your object right up there. How is that object like being a middle school student? Did you have one? Are you one? I think you're one. You're that soaring eagle. Peyton, you want to go? Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay. The red light, green light.
Yeah, so I'm number 2. This whole stuff.
It's heavy. I'm feeling weighed down.
Yep, I think she's got better than I do.
What do you have back there?
I'm number 8.
Some scissors.
You're sharp until you're used at it a lot.
You're sharp until you're not. Y'all want to go? The taco. Tell me, how is that like a middle school?
Breaks easily.
Okay. I like it. I like it. That's funny. It's just a mess. It's all over the plate. It doesn't have any manners. It just flops out everywhere. Anybody else? No takers? Okay. So it's things like whatever they would learn, you just put random things up, have them attach it to it. It's just another way to up their level of thinking and learning. If you have a kid that struggles, just know that that does not mean that they're not intelligent. Some of the kids just don't have the academic skills to be successful in those higher level courses at this time. That doesn't mean that they can't be developed, that they won't be developed. And if you're okay, if your child does struggle and they're okay struggling, because there's a lot to be learned in that thinking, and I think there's a lot to say about a kid that's intellectually capable but might struggle with those outputs and the academic skill, but they can still hold their own in conversations and dialogue, and they might not make the best grades on the written aspects or some of the projects, but they could still benefit a lot from the type of thinking that they'd be exposed to. You know your kids, so you have to make that judgment there. Many students are cognitively capable of understanding complex concepts, yet lack the academic skills to thrive. So what can you do? Give them support. If they struggle academically, give them support. Find any way that you can to support them. There are plenty of little places that are happy to take your money, and they do some good things though too, and they do teach those academic skills. I know a lot of the teachers, especially in this building, because my kids have come through here, that sixth grade year, they work a lot on those academic skills, and try and give them many different ways to take notes, how to organize them for they work very hard, and I know they do it at some of the other schools. I just can speak to at Chelsea Middle because my 3 of my kids have experienced that. So, but if they do lack the academic skills, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in a challenge course, but you might opt to wait, or it's really up to you and your child, and they have to be a part of that decision, because if you force them to do something they don't want to do, it's bad for everyone involved. And this is really important, and they're going to let me come back and talk to parents about getting to the heart of the matter, and I'll talk to you all about the adolescent brain, all of the things that you can do to build a relationship with your kids at a time when they're pushing away, and how you can avoid some of those major problems that come through just because their brain communicates differently. So if you know the science, it equips you a whole lot better. But one of the things is the executive functions, and as adults, we make moral judgments about executive function deficits because children with those deficits look like they've made a conscious choice to be lazy and unmotivated. And there are plenty of times where I've wanted to say that kid's lazy, and it's not. They're not lazy. A kid doesn't have this skill. A kid doesn't come there and just intentionally be a sloth. They're missing some skill, some bit of knowledge to help them be successful, and we just haven't found it. And as teachers, it's really hard to be a need finder when you have 150 kids and you I don't know, just do it, it's right there. But at home, you guys have a different, you see them in a different light, and some of them will hold it all together all day long at school and just drop it on you when you get home, just a horrible storm. But when you're seeing some of those things, be slow to judge them and say that they're lazy and unmotivated, because that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes they just don't have the activation skill to start something or the organization skill to keep up with something. Procrastination is just typical of adolescence in general. So those executive functions, it's one of the biggest issues with middle school kids because their brain that prefrontal cortex is not developed. It's all flabby. They got to work it out. So help them foresee consequences, sit down at the table, talk to them about things what'll happen if you do that? Help them plan, manage their time, prioritize, how to follow directions. Just give them 10 things just for fun. See how many they miss. Maybe you can keep building up their stamina with following directions because it's a difficult task for kids. And what we say to them is not what they hear because they're not processing things the way in which as adults we process them. They process through the limbic system, we process through the prefrontal cortex. It's completely different. So when they say, you said, and you're I would have never said that on my last breath, I would have never said that. But they heard it. And they will swear that you said something like that, and you're I would have never said that. But they hear it. because they process differently. Same thing happens to teachers. You're like, I never said that. Like, I would have never said that to the class. Like, that one never came out of my mouth. Not on my worst day would I have said that. But they hear it differently. So that's important to understand too, because they're not lying or trying to manipulate. Some of them are. But for the most part, they're not. They really do just miss bits of information, and then it comes in, and how they wanted to hear that sounded a lot better than what you actually said. So helping them slow down, follow those directions, listen, and have them repeat. Now, what did I just say? Okay, what are you supposed to do? Tell me one more time. But they need as much repetition. It doesn't matter how smart they are. These skills don't come easy. So very quickly, last bit, how can you support your child? Help them make connections to what they're learning on a personal and global level. Don't be the person that says, I hate reading. Pretend that you love reading. Somebody like, you have magazines all like you're just reading. You are like captain, readers are leaders. Like, just go with that. If you hate math, don't tell them you hate math. You know, like, I love numbers. It's my favorite thing. Can't wait to add this up. But practice, make those connections with them. Tie the conceptual lens whenever possible. So 7th grade interdependence and perspective, 8th grade discernment and empowerment. Encourage revision all the time. Provide support with organization note-taking. Avoid negative talk. I could talk to you about this forever too. But if you give them something negative in their head, teenagers are more negative anyway by nature. That's just the way that they're designed at this point. And they see all the negative things. Very hard to see the positive. As much as you can be a ray of sunshine, be that ray because they need it.